Good morning. I am Shaggy. I am Philalitea, and you have caught me trying to soak some of the water out of my shoes using paper towels. So, my birthday is coming up in a few days. And I'm not taking it well. I'm not handling it well. My therapist, really therapy for me was counterproductive in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, therapy was counterproductive for me, but she did teach me one thing that will stick with me for the rest of my life. She taught me that a simple phrase, the body knows. She taught me the simple phrase, the body knows. And the body does know. The body knows very well. I have a couple of friends right now who are going through transitionary phases in their lives, whether they fully appreciate the transitionary nature of the phases of their lives, or this phase of their life. And one of the things that I've been meditating on is that I've been very, very aware of the cyclical nature of human lives. Human consciousness, human cognition, human behavior. I've been aware of the cyclical nature of human beings for a very long time. My mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar type 2 when I was in 6th grade. So, first of all, the internet was nascent back then, so I've been researching what's on the internet and what's available on the internet, specifically schizophrenia, but most definitely paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar type 2 since I was in 6th grade. And so if we do the math, this is how I figure out how old I am. This is how, because of all of the trauma Swiss cheesing of my brain, I've talked about this on the channel before, but despair effectively punches holes in your brain, and we'll get there. I think about, there's a lyric in a Crash Test Dummies song, is how I think about this, where he says, he's describing looking forward to getting old. And he describes it as, he says he's looking forward to counting his days in coffee spoons, meaning not needing to keep track of the days, except in how many coffee spoons he has left uncleaned until he needed to do a load of dishes, effectively. And I've not had a great system for keeping track of time. Mostly in my life, I've kept track of time in the expanding trust that was offered to me in a woman, and then the retraction of that trust into betrayal. And so that's a trauma clock. That's a despair clock. And so what that means is that I have big, huge gaps in my memory, in my personal memory, just massive gaps. And so I have these friends who are in transitionary phases, and what you might not fully understand is that the only thing that stays common to you, about you, the only thing about you that stays the same is your body. And no matter what deterministic philosophy and neuroscience want to tell you the fact that half a second after your body makes a decision or has an impulse or engages in a reaction, you become aware of that, doesn't mean that you don't have choice. What that means is that your body, including your brain, have been with you, have been keeping you alive for longer than you have existed in this form. Because what you might not understand and what you might not know is that human beings go through periodical ego deaths. Because the brain-body system creates this thing called an ego. It creates an I, a self-identity. And that self-identity is a series of algorithms and neurological networks think of them as a preset that allow the body to make decisions half a second before you're aware of it, that you will feel like you made. So what that means is that the ego is your profile. The ego is the profile of this. The external is the profile icon, right? Profile picture, whatever they call that. I guess it's different in different places, but I'm getting ready, so this isn't a visual experience. It's not meant to be a visual experience, so cope. So when you experience trauma, and something that men get wrong very often is that women too, human beings get this wrong frequently, that trauma isn't comparative. The trauma that will kill your ego is unique to your ego. It's unique to you. And so the sorts of trauma it requires to kill my ego, if you're let's say if you're an organized psychopath, the trauma it requires, the amount of damage to my self-identity that it requires to kill that thing, that ego that I have, is different. And maybe other people would say more intense, or it just requires more damage than what they could sustain. And I have. I have endured more damage than you could sustain. So the body knows. The body knows because the body pre-existed your ego, and it has survived all of your ego exchanges, all of your ego deaths, all of your shedding of internal clothing, personalities, profiles. So like every time you change your username on like a social media platform because you're just like feeling like you're a different kind of person now, or like you want to have a different kind of identity, or you want to do a different thing, that's an ego death. It's an ego death. And they can be traumatic, and they can be normative. So, like, all this shit that Aaron Rodgers is doing in public is about, it's about ego dying and resurrection. He's trying to have a Jesus moment in public. He's living out his actual power fantasy of being a Christ-like figure and that important to the human species. Because he was never exactly that important to football. His career was overshadowed. You're going to forget this because of the most recent MVPs, but his career was overshadowed, his entire career, by Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Drew Brees. So I watched my mother my whole life, from the moment I was born until the day I turned 18, leverage her ego and killing it for attention for 18 years of my life. And so one of the mistakes I think that people make is assuming that they can be conditional in their behavior toward individual people because they believe, or have conditioned themselves to believe, or have been conditioned by an abuser to believe, that other people are able to personalize their behavior toward us. And they can't. So, like, a major red flag that you're dealing with an abuser is someone calling you unique and special, or saying that you're the only person that does blank. Especially early in a relationship. That's a major red flag for eventual abandonment, because it's doing the opposite of catastrophizing. It's effectively psychologically catastrophizing a person's unique gifts and ego, but what it is an attempt to manipulate that internal preset to benefit the person. Like, if there's a person in your life that you find yourself texting first thing in the morning and they don't respond until late in the day, they just leave you on red until late in the day, that person is an abuser. If it's early in the relationship, if you guys have been friends for a year, a full year, if you've known them for a full year and your relationship has not been like that for a full year, and then they start to back off into that kind of behavior, what you have is two people with attachment disorders who are trying to make sure that the relationship was stable and going to last. And that is a trauma response. It's a trauma response. It's a trauma response to being abused in the exact way I'm talking about. Because what abusers do typically is they condition you to a set of behaviors that they want you to do by exempling them to you. They'll require them. They'll say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, but they'll typically begin by doing them, and then using their doing it as an example of why you should do it, and then not doing it anymore because you never asked for it. Because you never asked for it, once they get your behavior to change, they won't slowly back off. Once your behavior has become patterned, habitual, they'll just stop. And so if you're dealing with somebody who's doing behaviors like this, what you're dealing with is someone who is either a pattern abuser, which they learned from a parent, or they are accidentally a pattern abuser because they learned it from a pattern abuser. When people talk about grooming, the thing that really annoys me about the conversation around grooming is that nobody talks about how grooming is exactly what women since the 1970s in public on television have said makes a good marriage. You find a man, you condition him to give you what you want behaviorally with sex, especially with oral sex. You move into his place, you throw away all of his shit, you replace it with your shit, and then now he doesn't get oral sex anymore. This has been the plot of every marriage rom-com, every marriage lampoon, every marriage spoof since the 1970s. And the idea, because see, feminism is decidedly medieval in its approach, because the people who founded feminism, the women, the thinkers who began feminism, were just rich girls. They were just rich girls with novel college degrees. They weren't allowed to go to university in the generation or two before Simone de Beauvoir and Mary Blackstone. No. Mary, it's like Wollstonecraft, I think. It's one name. Anyway, women weren't allowed to go to university before them. They were allowed to get private educations, tutors from university-educated men, even professors. So like the story of Eloise and Abelard is a story of a renowned teacher and lecturer who is hired privately to educate a nobleman's daughter, and they fall scandalously in love. He said something to the effect of, he told that man's daughter when that man found out that they were stooping, that he did everything he could to dissuade her and her sexual advances, and then after that he did every single thing he could think of to her in the name of educating her in the erotic arts. And so that means he was definitely smashing the back door open. And he told her dad that. And so in the modern context, that's appalling, because of is his name Paul Thomas Anderson? Paul Anderson, Thomas Anderson, whatever. Because of movies like 13 Candles, 16 Candles, 16 Candles. I didn't watch that shit. Because why the fuck do I, a male, want to watch a movie about a female protagonist telling teenage females what they should be like, that's written by a man? Women. This is not an accurate portrayal of what women are like. This is an idealized fantasization of what pederasty is like. Now see, because of my childhood molestations, I have been turned on, so to speak. Psychologically, I have been activated longer than you. Since I was 5. And so I am aware in a different way, I suppose. God, my shoes are going to be so wet. Okay, so today's going to be miserable. So, like, the goal for today, just while I'm here talking about it, is to get my shit charged and back to the tent as quick as possible, because it rained yesterday. I didn't tell this story on the channel, so I should tell it now. I have a crush on a girl. And when I get a crush on a girl, my mother taught me that when you like a girl, you demonstrate your unique value by making her something. And so that means writing her a poem, or drawing her a picture, or making something for her, singing her a song. And I've already tried singing for her, and it didn't impress her. She didn't know the songs. But my birthday is coming up. And so because of that, my body remembers. My body remembers that every year on July 1st, I have a bad day. And some of those days have been worse than others throughout the years. And so it's not a predetermination that I am going to be in a bad mood and I am determined to have a bad day. It's that the body knows. And so I've been dealing with generalized anxiety, the desire to flee, the desire to not be visible. The 7 steps of being depressed. I've wanted to go one by one down all of them, and let my ego die. And that means letting Shaggy Filaletea die, which isn't something I'm prepared to do. So whatever. And so anyway, I was just really anxious. I couldn't sit still, and I couldn't focus, and I was just jumping around. I couldn't even watch a short without my mind wandering. And so that's a sign of stress. My triggers were going haywire, and a lot of that is because if I like this girl and she likes me back, well, what does that mean? On some level, it means that she's going to have demands on me and on my time, and that those are going to trigger my pathological demand avoidance. And so I'm going to have to learn new coping methods for dealing with women, because my pathological demand avoidance and the natural demands of a girl who is not yet but does want to be your girlfriend and would like to cohabitate with you in the immediate future were things that I'm habitually used to. So since I've been 18, I have pathologically sought after permanent shelter. And now permanent is not what my shelter has ever been, but making sure that I had a job and was able to pay rent was the first thing I did after turning 18. Well, the second thing I did. The first thing I did was lose my virginity. The second thing I did, I wasn't going to be a sad boy working a fucking 40-hour job a week and dropping out of college and a virgin. That was not happening. And so I don't measure really my life in coffee spoons. I measure my life in women's O-faces. And I'm not ashamed of that, but it doesn't lend itself to being a public figure if I'm going to try to hide it. So I've done more than a little bit of prostitution in my life, because nothing mattered. And behaviors that appear or could be diagnosed as borderline personality disorders were the goal, because I wanted to understand the cycle. I wanted to understand the cycle that these women I kept falling in love with were going through. Well, it's like, well, if I am attracted to on some level, and I habitually attract on a very obvious other level this kind of woman, I want to understand her, because ultimately I'm a storyteller, and if I'm who I say I am, and I'm a shaman, that means that I am doing what ancient shamans did, and I'll explain right now. Give me just a second to collect myself now that I got enough of the water out of this that I'm not sloshing in my shoes anymore. While I was talking. So if you watch my Let's Plays recently, I talked about how true mastery is being able to talk about a subject, especially a complicated and intense subject that requires a lot of learning and education and lived experience to manage thinking about while doing something else with your hands and concentrating on something else with your hands is true mastery. So I'm not exactly sure what I have just been talking about. Really not. But I know that the inside of my shoes aren't wet. And then I was telling you that story. So I got to thinking, you can't do something stupid because you like a girl. That just doesn't make sense. You can't radically change your personality. You can't hold your ego down and strangle it and then present her this egoless consciousness for her to mold. Can't do that. First of all, you're twice her age. Probably. Close enough. And second, if you're going to do that, it has to be something that you can do that's not just for her. It's got to be something that you can do to generate a little bit of an income, or at least to have a little bit of something to do with your hands while you learn and talk, like you've been talking about. And so what is that thing that you, Shaggy, have been talking to your audience about wanting to do forever? I have been telling you that if you would just invest a few dollars in me, I could go and get macrame stuff, and I could put this on live and do this while I tie knots. And I suppose you just don't know what that is, or you think that it's going to be boring and dumb because you just have not watched my work. So I walk down to Hobby Lobby. I think, well, I'll just go price check. I'll just go look at prices. I have no intention of spending anything. I have no budget. Because what happened, I didn't tell this story exactly either. I was waiting. I want people to ask the question, well, what went wrong? If you were able to fix it so quickly, what went wrong? What was your process? How did you identify? What happened? I just don't think people care to ask. And the people who do care to ask, like, for example, the conclusion of this story, when she commented on what was happening with me, what was going on with me, I think she was afraid to offend me, to say something that would make me annoyed with her. And I listen to a lot of women's music because it's on in the store. And sometimes when I'm sitting in that Panera, I think to myself, just take your headphones out and just listen to this music. Just listen to this music. You don't have to like it to listen to it, to give it a fair shot, to communicate, for the artist to communicate what they're trying to communicate, and see if you learn anything. You're already doing something to occupy your hands and your attention. You're already concentrating on something else. So just let the music speak to you. Hear it or don't hear it, but give it an opportunity. And so maybe if somebody likes this and mentions it in the comments and asks me to, we can sit and we can do a discussion about this one particular song, because I don't remember the lyric, but it's a girl explaining that she, how does it go? She says something to the effect of, this'll never work, but we can give it a try, is the chorus. She's talking about how she knows she's going to do something to push him away and that she's not good enough. And then she says something in there that's internally inconsistent with her thesis of not being good enough. where she also says something to the effect of, well, I also know that you're just not good enough, and that's really where all of this comes from, that I like you even though I know I'm settling for you, and so I just assume that you think you're settling for me. That pathology is very real. I see it every day. I see it all the time. But I think that women have an entirely different conception of what confidence is, and it's confidence in the personality